Israel retains its right to self-defence if the deal is broken.
Reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities.
Elsewhere, Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said it was a very difficult day for Luton after the owner of Vauxhall announced plans to shut its van-making factory. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut the plant, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis, which also owns brands including Citroën, Peugeot and Fiat, said it would combine its electric van production at its other UK plant in Ellesmere Port. Stellantis added it hopes to transfer hundreds of jobs to the other plants. Rules imposed to speed up the transition to electric vehicles in the UK partly drove the decision, the company said. A Unite spokesman said the proposal that has been tabled today has been a complete slap in the face for our members in Luton, where Vauxhall vehicles have been manufactured for 120 years. Whatever the positive benefits this plan may have for Ellesmere Port, that is not acceptable. Russia has barred cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper and Rachel Reeves, from entering the country under new sanctions published by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Jonathan Reynolds and Ed Miliband are also among the 30 British citizens listed. The Russian ministry said it was putting members of the UK's political and military establishment, as well as journalists, on its stop list. It comes as Russia earlier on expelled a British diplomat and accused him of spying. Downing Street has denied these allegations, labelling them as baseless. And just briefly, the Tobacco and Vapes bill has cleared its first hurdle in the House of Commons this evening. MPs voted 415 to 47, that's a majority of 368, to approve the bill at second reading. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch was among the 47 MPs to vote against the bill, according to the division list. There was a free vote for Tory MPs, with former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins among the 23 Conservatives who voted in favour of the bill. The bill will undergo further scrutiny at a later date. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Let's go back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, thanks for your company. Is there something seriously wrong with the BBC? The corporation has just made a Zimbabwean striker its Women's Footballer of the Year. This is Barbara Banter, a 24-year-old who plays for Zimbabwe and Orlando Pride in Florida, both their women's teams. The only problem is that Barbara was forced to withdraw from the Women's Africa Cup of Nations in 2022 after it became apparent the footballers' testosterone levels were much higher than those permitted by the Confederation of African Football. Speaking at the time, the president of the Zambian FA said that Barbara failed a gender verification test, and a subsequent transfer to Real Madrid was also then blown apart when Barbara failed another gender verification test. So that's two. So with that controversy in mind, why did the BBC see fit to do this?
Hello, Barbara. Sorry to interrupt your team meeting, everyone, but Barbara, we just wanted to deliver a special award for you. You are the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year 2024! Congratulations!
There you go, mate.
So, well done, Barbara. But of all the female footballers in the world, why does the BBC choose somebody who has failed gender verification tests to make its Women's Footballer of the Year? Anyone might think the corporation is using licence fee money to, well, maybe troll us? The Women's Rights Network, which posted a link to the announcement saying, a footballer who is banned from the Women's African Cup of Nations, no words. And the campaigner and former Olympic swimmer Sharon Davies said on X that the award was just bloody ridiculous. So does the BBC really care about women's football? Does it really care about empowering women? Or is this all just a big virtue signalling exercise funded by hard-earned licence fee money belonging to Brits who have, quite frankly, had enough of all the gaslighting? It's time Auntie was shown the red card. Let's get the thoughts now of my panel tonight. Political commentator Alex Armstrong, political commentator Esther Kraku, political commentator Alex Armstrong and the former Labour Defence Minister Bill Rammell. Good evening to you all.
Evening.
Alex Armstrong, time to show Auntie the red card. What are they doing? Please explain.
I don't think anyone knows. It seems it has to be a PR stunt. That's the best I can come up with, trying to make sense of everything that I've read here in the story pack. I don't know much about women's football, I'll be completely honest.
You don't need to, it's not very good.
Well, there we go. And I wouldn't know who else I'd nominate.
That sounds bigoted, Esther. You're allowed to say that these days.
No, the thing is, every time I say this, people don't understand. It's not because women footballers are not good. If you actually, they've done studies where they've had male and women footballers side to side, and when you can't tell, like, they remove their heads, they look exactly the same. The problem is women footballers play on pitches designed for men, so they're the same sizes that men play on, and because their shots don't travel as far, it looks like watching toddlers on the pitch. It's not because women footballers aren't as talented. It's just they don't invest in the sport.
Yes. Do you not watch it?
I would get in all sorts of trouble if I sat here and gave my free
how can you rave about women's football and you've not built a single pitch designed for women?
Yeah. But you know what? It isn't the matter of fact...
Sorry, Alex, for interrupting. We're down a tangent.
No, I was just going to say, isn't the matter of fact about this that every single person that's commented this, even people at the United Nations, are saying these gender rules that the Confederation in Africa have put in place are there for a reason. They're there to protect women. They're there to make sure the sport is fair. Even the UN are saying it, and they're pretty woke.
Isn't it a bit horrifying that we have gender eligibility rules? Why is that necessary? You're either
well, it is because for want of a better phrase, gender fluidity. The bottom line
but that's irrelevant.
No, but the bottom line is it is unfair for genetic men to be competing against women.
But there's no other kinds of men. It's unfair for men to compete against women in sports. It's really that simple. And the muddying of the language and the saying, but the gender this, and that has nothing to do with sport. This individual, I'm sorry, the elephant in the room is clearly a man.
Well,
right?
I don't know.
Clearly a man, not a sports bra inside.
Well,
Guess what? As a woman, I can say no woman can play football without a sports bra on.
It's not been verified.
We have things in the way.
Whether it's a man or a woman, and I don't know. And my simple point is...
You don't know? You didn't notice the bulge?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't particularly...
I'm just...
But the bottom line is this person failed a testosterone test in 2022 and therefore was excluded from a competition. The problem is there aren't the same rules in each competition. So FIFA have different rules, the Olympic Association have different rules. That needs sorted out. There needs to be mandatory sex testing at a set level. And in terms of the BBC, I think this is cock-up rather than conspiracy. It seems like they've contracted out their judgment to 40 different football experts who aren't qualified to make judgments about what the testosterone level is acceptable.
They didn't tell any of that judging panel that there was controversy or question marks over this person's gender. Again, I don't know if this guy or girl is a guy or a girl.
Yes, you do.
My point being, the BBC knows there's a big question mark over it, so why, out of all the footballers in the world, the female footballers, why choose this person?
I think it goes back to my original point. I think it's a PR stunt to raise more awareness about women's football. It's obviously not a profit-making business, right? Otherwise, more people would watch it. It's as simple as that.
I do feel like women's football
is
shoved down our throats in this country.
Well, it absolutely
but
is.
It's ironic because...
And that's exactly what J.K. Rowling's saying, by the way. She said this is spitting in women's faces. The BBC is spitting in women's faces. And she said they not go door to door knocking to find a woman.
But there's a fundamental unfairness at the heart of this. I saw a statistic that in 2017, 5,000 men ran a faster time than the woman Olympic 400 metre.
The US women's football team were beaten by a group of 15-year-old boys. I mean,
so they shouldn't be competing with men.
They shouldn't be.
The World Cup winning women's national team in the US lost to Dallas boys under 15s 5-2.
But sensible sports personality, Serena Williams, it was either Venus or Serena, came out and said, I wouldn't want to play against a male athlete, even in the bottom of the league.
I mean, she lost against someone who was ranked 200 and something in the world.
Exactly.
I mean, this comes at an interesting time where, for Women Scotland are basically asking for a judicial review which contradicts the Scottish government's stance on gender recognition and how it contradicts against the Equality Act. So as we sit here, 5 Supreme Court judges are literally debating what a woman is.
It's mad.
Amongst them, being led by a man, a male judge, by the way.
We've
lost our minds.
We've absolutely lost our minds.
It's frustrating because we have real problems in this country. I'm even pained by the fact that we're having this conversation as if people are not going to freeze to death this winter or the economy isn't going down.
It's the BBC that continually push this kind of stuff, and I don't understand why. There's an array of amazing, talented female footballers, not as good as the men. It's just simple. It's genetics, as you said. men are faster, they're more powerful, they're more technical.
Well, it's more entertaining. But here's the thing. I would say this. If they actually invested in women's football, if they actually, the crazy idea, made, like, the pitches the size of women, right? I actually think that would make it a much more enjoyable spectator sport. It's not because we're denying this. Like, Lionel Messi is the same like height as many female footballers. He's only 5'7", right? But it's not about just the size or the stature or whatever. It's the fact that as a spectator sport, it's terrible because they haven't invested in it. They just shove it down our throats and expect us to watch like what looks like toddlers on a pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I
think there's millions of people who don't agree with you that actually they find women's football attractive. But the reality is, men's bone structure, their muscle strength,
they're faster and they're more powerful.
Is greater than for women. And Ben, in terms of the BBC, I genuinely don't think this was a deliberate policy to promote a transgender, if that's what it is.
What is it then, Bill? Like, that's what I can't get. Like, honestly, thinking about, like, really seriously, what were they thinking?
Well, I think it's a lack of due diligence. It's you contract out your judgment to 40 so-called football experts who are not qualified to make a judgment about whether they're men or women.
They must have typed his name into Google at some point.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think someone's head should roll at the BBC.
Yes, 100%.
In the BBC's defence, if I can offer that, this player...
You're welcome to try.
Barbara was or is a good footballer in the Women's League. She bangs in about 20 goals a season. She's a very good footballer.
Well, it's not surprising.
In the Women's League.
That's what men tend to do.
Men are pretty good at women's sports, traditionally.
Yeah,
incredible.
So you think someone should be sacked at the BBC, Bill?
I don't think it's
or disciplined. I think it's a complete cock-up. And, look, I'm a fan of the BBC, and I think it can do without this kind of adverse publicity.
Yes. But they keep on putting their foot in it all the time, don't they? They just can't stop. They can't help themselves.
Is it deliberate?
It can't be incompetence. I mean, the BBC is massive. This is what I can't get my head around. It is a huge corporation, thousands of people working there, and not one person stopped them and said, that might be a man, by the way.
I mean the chest might have given it away, or the bulge, or the lack of a sports bra.
You keep saying that. Look, I'm no
we lost our minds. We can clearly see what a man is.
But how do you know that they're not wearing some sort of like chest binder or something?
Because women don't have the natural body shape of like a Dorito. Okay, the men have broad chests. Men don't have breasts. Men have bulges between their legs.
Give me a few donuts. I might have a few breasts.
Oh my God.
You've got Ozempic now. You're absolutely fine. They'll be gone in a couple of weeks.
OK. All right. Well, there we go. The BBC have crowned their Women's Footballer of the Year. We're not sure if it's a man or a woman. I wish the player well. I wish Barbara well. Seems like a nice person. But, I mean, when you fail 2 gender tests, it does raise the question, what are they doing in the sport?
She's just going to boxing. Get a gold medal for that.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, I think she might have.
I
think she did go into boxing. Oh, it's just as brilliant, isn't it?
She or he was professionally trained as a boxer. I think that they boxed for 4 years.
I think we've got our answer.
We've lost our minds.
We've got our answer.
We've gone mad.
It's a mess.
We've gone mad.
Yes.
All right. A spokeswoman for the BBC said, was it a spokeswoman or a spokesman? I suppose it doesn't matter to the BBC. They said, as well as playing in the past 2 Olympic Games and the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup, Barbara Banter plays for the Zambian national women's team and in the USA for Orlando Pride, making her fully eligible for the award, which celebrates talent in women's football. The 5-player shortlist was decided by an expert panel made up of current and former professional coaches and journalists based on performances in the last 12 months, with the winner voted for by the public. And I think, as you said, Bill, with these different football confederations and organisations, the FA, AFCON, UEFA, FIFA and so on, they've all got different rules. Yep. Some test for gender, some don't, so I guess that's...
And that's got to be sorted out.
Some don't use their eyes, some do.
OK, all right, still to come. Boris Johnson's made have you seen this? A frankly bizarre intervention today, blaming Britain's obesity crisis on the Church of England's failure to provide spiritual sustenance. He also blamed fear of paedophiles for Britain's childhood obesity crisis, but isn't it actually a parent's responsibility to watch what their kids are eating? Or do we just blame the paedophiles? Going head-to-head on that next are the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, and the journalist, author and mum, Julie Cook. That's next. Don't go away.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
The Daily Mail now, Josh, and pub landlords have to worry about more than the optics when it comes to offensive banter,
yeah,
it seems.
This is a really big story and important. Pub landlords could have to become banter cops to stop themselves being sued by staff offended by comments from customers under workers' rights reform. So, Labour, when they were part of their election process, they were like, we're going to reform workers' rights, and that all sounds good on paper, but there were issues in terms of how might it affect employees and fear from employees costing them more money. One of these things that they're sort of pushing through, though, is that in the Equality Act of 2010, part of the issue was that if you were offended at work or someone said something sexist or racist, something that affected you, the employer had to take some sort of, like, they had three chances to kind of take action. Now, the employer has to should have taken action already. So employees can sue employers. Now, this has a big impact on us because we're comics and we perform in venues. And if some of the bar staff hear a joke that they don't like, then they can sue their employer, potentially, under this legislation.
So it's not punters?
Well, also, it could be like you're at a bar and some bloke is like, oh, I like that top, or whatever. That's not good behaviour. But the point is now that employee could sue their employer.
So, because, I mean, the sort of scenario I was imagining was that a barmaid was being maybe sexually harassed or
That's
something.
what they're focusing in this article, but other articles have gone down the free speech route.
OK.
And also venues and universities having lectures. We saw it at, in Edinburgh Fringe Festival and Sadowitz. He had a show cancelled not because of any punters, but because two of the 18-year-olds were working. They were upset.
There was a bar in Brighton, wasn't there? There was a story we covered a few weeks ago. A bar in Brighton threw some people out. Because
exactly. They had turfs on the.
Turfs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. Do parents need to take more responsibility for their kids' weight? It's time now for the head-to-head. And Boris Johnson has made a rather bizarre intervention today, blaming the Church of England for Britain's obesity crisis. He claims that the Church's failure to provide, quote, spiritual sustenance was leading people to gorge themselves. In a report published today, the former PM went on to claim that Britain's childhood obesity crisis was a result of people being told there were paedophiles everywhere. He said, "When I was a kid, we were all out playing in the streets the whole time. You don't see that with kids nowadays. They're all fatsos, and I'd be shot for saying they're fatsos, but that's the truth. Nowadays, kids are sitting on screens and being told that it's all too dangerous to go outside because there are paedophiles everywhere, apparently." So tonight I'm asking, do parents need to take more responsibility for their children's weight? Let me know your thoughts by heading to gbnews.com/yoursay or tweet me at GBNews, and while you're there, vote in the poll. I'll bring you the results very shortly. I'm joined now by the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, and the journalist, author and mum, Julie Cook. Good evening, ladies. Thank you for joining me. Julie, are parents to blame for children being overweight?
I think they are. I think when you're a parent, you almost make, it's not just your responsibility, you sort of almost sign a covenant to look after your children. That means taking them for their jabs, it means making sure they don't run in front of a car, and it also means ensuring they eat healthily. They don't know what's wrong and right. All they know is that sugar and chocolate taste good, and there are adverts everywhere, and unfortunately their height out next to the cashier's desk, they're all the things they're laid out for them. It's our job as parents to say, no, you can't have too much of that. No, that could lead to this, that, or the other. I have an 11-year-old now, and already I'm having to say, look, no more ice creams during the week. You might get diabetes one day. You know, we have to be honest about this. We're in a massive crisis of obesity, and it's down to parents to stop it.
Yeah, that's what my wife says to me when I try and get the ice cream out the freezer most nights. Sarah, you think it's a bit more nuanced, don't you, and a bit more complicated? Do you think obesity can stem from, I don't know, genetically and other health conditions?
Yeah, what frustrates me about the blame culture around obesity is that we're kind of looking for an answer and looking for someone to kind of point a finger at. And I think what we know is because obesity is a hugely complex chronic condition, it's not as simple as just blaming the parents or blaming the church, as Boris has done today. We know that biology plays a huge part in this, so genetics, for example. So I don't disagree that parents should be, guiding their children around making healthier food choices, etc., as should schools, and people should know what a balanced, healthy diet is. 100% agree with that. But what we do know is that you could put two children together in a room and feed them the same foods, and because of the genetics or the biology of those children, one of them may live in a smaller body than the other, and that isn't down to the wrong food choices or the wrong behaviours. That's just down to the genetics and the situation. So I think we need to kind of bear that in mind when we keep blaming parents, because for some people, the parents may be doing absolutely the right thing, but their child's still living in a larger body. And I think they're the people that I am concerned about, is that we seem to kind of put too much of that onus onto the individual rather than looking to the government and saying, what are you doing to food companies about actually formulation of foods and ultra-processed foods and putting restrictions on there? And have we got more green spaces for people? Are we encouraging more outdoor activity? There's lots of things that we can be doing rather than just pointing fingers of blame at the parents, for instance. So that's kind of my take on it.
Julie, what do you make of Boris Johnson's claim that because everyone's scared of paedophiles, children aren't playing outside anymore?
I mean, I have to say, I think the link there is slightly tenuous, particularly blaming the church as well. I mean, I think we've got to be honest here. I do agree with some of what our other lady here says. There's more to it than just parents having to crack the whip and tell children what to eat, of course. But I don't think it's down to being afraid of paedophiles. I mean, that's just crazy. I don't really understand the link at all.
Well, he's saying that parents are too scared to let their kids play on the streets because there's paedophiles roaming the towns everywhere, and they think they'll get kidnapped, so I assume. Yeah,
I agree. I can see the point. I'm just saying that it doesn't really correlate. You can take your child for a walk in your local park yourself, or you can stop the car a few meters more before you get to school and walk the last mile or so. There are things you can do that have nothing to do with child safety, to do with you being out and about with your child, which is why it comes back to the parent having to say, look, let's go for a walk instead of driving to the shop. Things like that parents can do.
OK. Sarah, do you think overweight parents are a bad example to their children, especially when their children become overweight or obese?
I mean, again, so I'm someone, I live with obesity, and I have a child. So, I could sit there and say, people could say I'm a bad parent because I live with obesity and I've had a child. Now, she doesn't have a weight problem, and I mean, she's only young, she's 5. And I have been very conscious about, as a parent, not wanting her to live with obesity like me, because it's caused me a lot of I felt like a failure. It's been a very negative experience for me, which is why I do what I do now, because I need people to understand why. Because I know that having lost weight multiple times and regained it and lived a very healthy life, exercising, etc., that I still lived in a larger body than other people. That's why I know that it's not as simple as just getting the parent to do what, tell the parent to, or the child to eat certain foods. I think restriction around food can be quite detrimental as well. So I've been really brought up with, you can't eat X, Y, and Z my whole life. So therefore you crave those foods and you want those foods, because the minute you're being told you can't have it, you want it more. So I think we need to be quite careful. So with my daughter, I don't stop her from eating anything that she wants to. But what I didn't do was introduce high refined sugared foods into her diet at an early age, because she didn't know what chocolate was. She didn't know what sweets were. So I was like, why would you encourage children to eat those things when they don't know what they are? So I have been quite mindful about that. But if she wants them now, I will let her have it. But actually, she doesn't like chocolate, and she doesn't like cakes because she didn't develop those taste buds for it at a young age. So it's really, I think it's just interesting, and different people she could be living in a certain size body because of her genetics as well, not just because of the choices that I've made. And I'm very aware of that. So I think it's just about being mindful of trying to do the best you can as a parent. And everyone's different and everyone can only manage certain things.
So do your children have sweets and chocolate now? How old are they?
So my daughter's 5 now, and yeah, I mean, she has access to them if she wants them. But like I say, she doesn't like the taste. She would choose fruit over sweets, and that's her own choice. That's not me putting that on her. Yeah.
Oh, lucky you. Well done. With my 5-year-old, I use the Chocky bars to bribe him quite a lot of the time. I know it's bad, but he plays a lot of sport. He's very active. I don't think sweets and chocolate are that bad, to be honest. Julie, what do you think about sweets and chocolate for kids as treats, or maybe, in my bad case, bribing them? Do you think it's a good thing or bad parenting?
No, I think everyone deserves a treat. I mean, God, even in the 50s and 60s, before we had all these processed foods, people enjoyed a cake as a treat. I mean, we've always had that, haven't we? It's part of our culture. You sit down, you have a cake, or you have an ice cream at the seaside, and all these things are ingrained in our culture as treats, unfortunately. But I agree actually with our other lady there that as long as you don't introduce them to children young when they're developing their taste buds and they suddenly find out what sugar is and how addictive it is, or salt and how food tastes different with salt on it, then I think they can then develop those tastes for themselves later and it's not as damaging. But I'm like you, Ben, unfortunately, I will occasionally say to my daughter, you get your homework done and you can have an ice cream. So I'm aware that I'm part of the problem, maybe.
Yeah, OK, all right, fascinating debate. I do think, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say when I see fat or obese children, I think it's borderline child abuse. I don't think there's any reason, unless it's for a very, very rare medical condition, I don't think there's any reason to have a fat child. Their metabolisms are super fast. They're normally out running all day, or should be anyway. And I just feel so bad. You see some children plonked in front of television sets, watching YouTube all day after school or nursery. I don't think it's good. And I think parents should set a better example. Anyway, Sarah LeBrock and Julie Cook, thank you for joining me this evening. Appreciate it. So what do you think at home? Do parents need to take more responsibility for their kids' weight? Lee on X says, of course they do. How are kids supposed to know what's good for them? I mean, even the adults don't. Yep, good point. And Todd on X says, absolutely. There is a depressingly modern phenomena that everything is the state's fault. Personal responsibility as rare as hen's teeth these days. And your verdict is now in. 98.6% of you agree the parents need to take more responsibility for their kids' weight, while 1.4% of you say no, they don't. Coming up, a leading pollster claims Nigel Farage's Reform UK are now the main beneficiaries of the Prime Minister's plummeting popularity. Over 2.6 million people have now signed the petition for another general election. The Tories, though, are nowhere to be seen. So are Reform UK now the real opposition? Anne Widdecombe joins me live next.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours see a return to wet weather in the south with blustery winds. A different story further north where frost and fog will prevail because of high pressure sitting to the north of Scotland. That's keeping winds light and skies clear as we go into Tuesday night. Meanwhile, another low turns up across the southwest. Wet and windy weather into southwest England, South Wales, and then by midnight running along the south coast, pushing into the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. The heaviest rain will be along southern counties of England with the risk of localised flooding because it's coming on top of all the wet weather we've recently had, and it's going to be an unsettled but mild start to Wednesday in the south and across central parts of England and Wales. Very different conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we start with clear spells, frost and some dense fog patches, especially for parts of Northern Ireland. Poor visibility on the roads first thing, so watch out for that. Also some fog patches for southern Scotland, northern England. Chilly start out there. But for the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia and the southeast, a damp start to the day with the winds pushing outbreaks of rain or showers in from the southwest, and then those winds changing direction as the rain clears into the afternoon and becoming increasingly strong down the eastern side of England. Meanwhile, brightening skies for West Wales, the southwest, as well as northern England and Northern Ireland once any early fog patches clear. A crisp but bright day for northern and eventually western parts of the country, whilst it stays cloudy and breezy further southeast. Thursday starts with outbreaks of rain into the southwest. This rain generally light and patchy, shouldn't cause too many issues, but it then spills into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales, whilst it stays dry and bright further north and east. Friday's similar. We're going to see some rain at times in the west, and it turns milder by Saturday.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. Now, despite the Prime Minister's attempts yesterday to laugh off his rapidly diminishing popularity, 2.6 million people, actually it's 2.7 million people now, have signed the petition launched over the weekend calling for a second general election. And speaking on GB News today, the legendary polling expert Sir John Curtis said there's one party in particular that is benefiting from the public's discontent with this government.
We just have to remember the electorate were more fragmented in July than they had been at any previous post-war election. And I think, in a sense, the real question is, if the government doesn't turn it around, and if the Conservative Party doesn't succeed in re-ingratiating itself in the minds of the public, where will the public go? At the moment, at least, one can see with the government's popularity already down, it is indeed Nigel Farage and Reform that are principally profiting. They're now running about 19% in the opinion polls.
I'm joined now by Reform UK spokeswoman Anne Widdecombe. Anne, good evening, nice to see you. So are Reform now the opposition in all but name only, as some are suggesting?
I actually think we've been that for some time because, first of all, the Conservative Party's spent months, as usual, distracted by, first of all, leadership speculation and then an actual leadership election. While we were building membership, we're about to cross the 100,000 mark, building membership, getting policies over. We got 5 MPs. People thought we wouldn't get any MPs. That was one reason why they still voted Conservative. They now know that they can actually get Reform MPs.
But Anne, may I interject? Sorry to be so rude. You have 5 MPs, but the Tories, of course, have more than 100. The Lib Dems have 70-odd, despite Ed Davey doing everything but proving opposition. You only have 5 MPs.
Indeed. And we had more, of course, than 4 million votes, and we had more votes than the Lib Dems. I mean, if you want a contest, you need to look at those sorts of figures as well. But I'm making a rather different point. I'm saying that people at the last general election didn't expect us to have any MPs. They didn't even really expect Nigel Farage to win. Now they know that if they vote Reform, they can actually get a Reform MP. And that, I think, has made a difference. I think John Curtis is right. People are very disillusioned with this government, but they don't see an alternative at the moment in the Tories. So, of course, we're benefiting.
What do you make of recent polls putting the Tories now back above Labour? And also, how have Reform been doing in these recent polls? I know there's a few that's been knocking around, but have you been making as much strides as the Tories have over Labour?
Well, as you heard John Curtis say, we're running at about 19%, which is quite something for what is still regarded as a small party, even though it's growing very fast. We have time on our side. Can I just make a comment, please, if there's time, on this petition, which is simply this. Yes, I'm enjoying Keir Starmer's discomfiture with this petition, but it is a lost cause. We have another 4 years of Labour. They have an unassailable majority, and that is what we've got to concentrate on, not on creating a second general election, because in that case that would make a nonsense of opposing a second referendum. So it's the same principle. You don't have two goes. You had a go, and Labour won fairly and squarely under our electoral system. That's it for another 4 years.
OK, got it. Anne, I don't know if you saw Craig Revel-Horwood, the Strictly judge. He made some comments overnight saying that he's had to tame his performance as a critic on the show because if he said the same kind of things he said 20 years ago, he'd be cancelled or accused of being a bully. You, of course, were a star of Strictly at one point. I just wanted to give you a blast from the past and your own interaction with Craig Revel-Horwood. Let me show you this.
Now for Anne Widdecombe and her partner Anton Dubek. Craig, start us off.
Well, you do realise that the Ark Royal has been decommissioned. So I thought I'd give you the Flying Fortress.
She's got all the lines in.
I thought it was more like the dancing hippos, darling, and
Oh, Anne, the dancing hippo. Do you think it will be a shame that we'll miss that kind of thing from Craig now? And why is he being so soft?
They called me worse than that. They called me a Dalek and drag. They called me the Ark Royal.
No.
Indeed, Glenn Goodman, the late, very revered Glenn Goodman, told us we were like a pair of hemorrhoids. So, you know, I mean, the insults came thick and fast, but I could handle them because I'd been a politician. I wasn't a rather weepy star. Yeah, I regret it. If Craig is reining in his comments because he fears being cancelled, all I can say is, come on, Craig, get some guts.
Yeah, stop being a wet wipe. I mean, everything else has gone woke at the BBC. At least Craig can stand firm and, you know, stick to his guns. What year was that, Anne? Remind us.
Yes, I will, 2010.
Oh, OK. Did you have a good time? How was it?
I had an excellent time. I loved Strictly. I was expecting to last, I'm quite serious about this, I was expecting to last 2 weeks and then go away and spend the money because you still earn it, even if you're eliminated fairly early. That's what I thought was going to happen, instead of which it just took off. And it was such tremendous fun. And I probably haven't had so much fun and frivolity. It's probably since I was a student. I mean, it was incredible.
Ah, brilliant. And you were great. I was looking on online earlier for all the clips, all your dances. That was the tango, I think. You were certainly a mover. Well done. It looked like you had great fun. And, of course, you were laughing and smiling all the way through as well. And on to one more serious matter, a story developing this evening. A terrorist friend of Manchester Arena bomber Salman Abedi has been freed from jail. His name is Abdalrouf Abdallah, who was a childhood friend of Abedi, and he was released from HMP Full Sutton in East Yorkshire on Tuesday today when his sentence came to an end. Robert Jenrick, the Tory MP, has said this is the terrorist. He was released on Tuesday. His prison officer, psychologist and parole officer said he was high risk, engaging with extremism and intends to commit terrorist-related offending. The Justice Secretary must intervene. Your thoughts, please, Anne, on this case?
Difficult if he's come to the end of his sentence. You know, I mean, justice is supposed to be served if you come to the end of your sentence. This really is, however, somebody who's got to be monitored very, very closely in society and really monitored. And, you know, it's not just a question of the Prevent programme. This is one for the police, the probation service. That man has to be watched. But if he's at the end of his sentence, then, you know, there is no way he can be kept in jail.
Yeah. OK, Reform UK spokeswoman Anne Widdecombe, thank you for joining me this evening. It's been fun. Thank you. Yeah, we'll keep tabs on that story. He was released today. As Robert Jenrick says, the Justice Secretary must intervene. His prison officer, I repeat again, said he's high risk and engaging with extremism. And meanwhile, we're letting paedophiles out early and we're banging up people for tweets. So what does that say about the state of our justice system in the UK? Anyway, coming up, British troops have tonight been scrambled to protect US air bases in the UK after mystery drones were spotted flying overhead. That's after suspect packages were blown up all over the UK last week. So is Russia throwing its weight around on British soil? Former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood joins me next.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The birth rate in Britain has sunk to 1.49, well below replacement rate. Yet policies pursued by both major parties are still to spend huge sums to encourage parents back to their work when their children are still at preschool age. Should we not be helping parents to spend longer at home, asks his new book, whilst recognising that in an age of sex equality, the question is fraught. David Goodhart joins me now.
We undervalue the domestic realm, and that has led to lots of the most negative trends in British society. About half of children in the UK are not living with both of their biological parents by the age of 14. We have, of families with dependent children, about 24-25% are single-parent households. Mainly mothers, and they're doing, valiant work. But of course, it means you don't have the investment in children that a two-parent family can give. I mean, the reason why it's a care dilemma is that a lot of these negative trends are also kind of intimately related to positive things, like that movement of women into work, the fact that women are no longer so defined by marriage and motherhood, the fact that women and men are freer to leave unhappy relationships. And the challenge for modern liberal societies is, how we hold on to those freedoms but get a better balance, which means, I think, investing more in the domestic realm. We spend a total now of £9 billion on childcare subsidies. Why not give that subsidy direct to young parents so they could then choose whether to subsidise themselves, as it were, to be able to afford to stay at home, or to give it to a nursery, or to give it to granny, or to keep it in the home.
GB News.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. Now, around 60 British troops have been urgently deployed to help defend air bases used by the US Air Force in the UK. That's after a series of unexplained drone sightings this morning. This comes after similar incidents were reported at bases in Suffolk last week, and after several suspicious packages were also blown up at sites including Gatwick Airport and the US Embassy over the weekend, and Euston Station as well. There was a dodgy device discovered. These incidents have raised eyebrows, especially amid increased tensions with Russia, which today bans senior Labour ministers Rachel Reeves, Yvette Cooper and Angela Rayner from visiting Moscow. I'm now joined by former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, good evening. Thank you for joining me. I had a bit of a theory in the wake of all these suspect packages being discovered that perhaps it was Russia maybe letting us know that they're here, there are agents here, letting their presence be known, and now we've got these drones. I don't know if it's linked. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. What do you think?
Well, good evening to you. Maybe we first cover the drone story and then link that in as to the wider pattern of activity that we're seeing from Russia. But given the impact drones are having on the Ukraine battlefield, we see that playing out almost every day on our TV screens. It is surprising to see that we're not better prepared to protect our military bases here in the UK, especially airfields where unauthorized overflight of any kind, manned or indeed unmanned, is prohibited. I would strongly recommend every single RAF base and the US bases as well, from Marham to Lossiemouth, must have a dedicated counter-drone capability. Otherwise, it becomes very simple indeed to disable a runway and stop our F-35s and our Typhoons from protecting us from something far more sinister, a type of air attack that we could endure. You know, I visited Ukraine a number of times and also Homeland Security exhibitions. The counter-drone technology exists. It's not complicated or expensive, but if it's not in place, it sends a very loud message indeed to state and non-state actors that we are not prepared, and this is our weakest link. So let's understand the new threat picture and let's respond to it as well. But if I may then bring that together with the other aspects that are taking place, we need to wake up and say that we are in a gray zone war with Russia, because it's this aggression, antagonism, often beneath the radar, if you like, to cause economic discord, to political upset, societal angst. This is what Russia is doing on a daily basis. Cyber attacks, disinformation. This is what Russia is very, very good at. And because I think in reaction to us supplying the Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine, they are now retaliating. And we need to wake up that this is against us, not just Ukraine.
So my theory then, you think, wasn't a million miles off? I mean, look, we can't prove it.
Not at all.
We don't know if these incidents were linked to Gatwick, Houston, and wherever else, but that was my immediate thought. It was a kind of, again, I'm not an expert, but my thinking was, this is Putin just saying, guys, we're here, and this is in response to those Storm Shadow missiles being used.
So let's wait to see the detail of what happens. But as I say, on a regular basis, on a drumbeat, we've had the NHS, we've had the Ministry of Defense, we've had the Department of Transport cyber attacked by Russia. We know that. But we have a dated view of war. And that's preventing us from realizing that we're actually in a form of war with Russia. We still think of war as combat, soldiers, tanks maneuvering on battlefields and so forth, missiles crashing into buildings. But that old image of war is arguably blinding us to what's happening today. War is no longer confined to battlefields and troops in uniform anymore. And we're in danger of missing that point. So Moscow is attacking Britain and indeed other countries, make it very, very clear, in much subtler but harder to pin down ways. And that grey zone warfare, as I say, cyber attacks, disinformation, covert operations, even assassinations that we've had, Novichok 2018, these are actions that cause the economic harm, that instill that anxiety across society, but all preventing war from taking place, triggering a kinetic response from the UK.
Talk to me about these drones. I don't know how much of an expert you are on them, but how can they get into UK airspace undetected? How high do they fly, do you know?
Well, this is a very good question, exactly what was going on here. This was probably a recce designed to calculate any response from us. And I'm sure the flight controllers were probably surprised that the drones survived the mission. Because surely if you fly over a sensitive area, critical national infrastructure, you'd expect those, any form of drones to be shot down. And they weren't. Not only did that, what happened here is they then came back a few days later and did exactly the same thing.
I mean, that's concerning, isn't it? Tobias, sorry to interject. That's concerning, isn't it? I mean, that sounds like a massive gaffe, a massive national security risk, not once but twice, if indeed these are Russian drones, that we've not shot them out of the sky or even detected them. That sounds worrying,
how we get rid of them. There are many ways that you can disable a drone. You can jam them, you can actually fire something from the ground and so forth. You can use laser technologies. There are many ways of bringing drones down. What you can't do is simply let them fly right across your runways, taking photographs, doing the recce's and so forth, and disrupting what's going on the runway itself, meaning that, as I say, if there was a larger attack, a more sinister attack, then the runway is taken out, our emergency response aircraft couldn't get off the ground itself. So absolutely, I strongly recommend that every single RAF base, indeed military base as well, is now equipped with counter-drone capabilities. That must be the priority for the defence review, which is now currently taking place.
Well, talking about the defence review and Labour's commitment to, I mean, they say they want to get defence spending up to 2.5%. They're taking their time with it. But last week, they cut £500 million worth of what they claim was old military equipment to the scrap heap. So helicopters, I think there were some tanks in there and other bits and bobs. I've heard the argument that, you know, for now, we need those things. Even if they're old, even if they're a bit dodgy, we need them at a time when tensions with Russia are at their peak. What do you make of them doing that, scrapping £500 million worth of gear?
I can understand the argument, and it's very easy on the other side of the fence to say, oh, my God, why did you do that? I suspect that a Conservative government would have done exactly the same, OK? The ships you're talking about, the Type 23s, very, very old indeed, as were the drones that were dismantled as well. They've been there for over 14, 15 years. They were starting to crash into the hills. They're obsolete, as was the Puma helicopters as well, some of them over 50 years old. So it costs more to keep these things going. The point you raise is very, very important indeed. Where is the replacements? And I'm afraid that isn't just this government, it's previous governments as well. Over the last 30 years, since the end of the Cold War, we've been far too complacent in preparing ourselves for potential war because the threat hasn't been there. But boy, has that now changed, as we've just been discussing now, because it isn't just Russia that geopolitically is challenging us. Of course, you've got China interpreting our global order in a very different way. And of course, Iran doing its thing in the Middle East as well. The world has changed and we're not changing with it. And that's why we absolutely need to spend more on defense. I'm pleased that Pat McFadden, who's the cabinet leader, is talking about cybersecurity now. He's actually addressing a NATO conference on that. I think John Healey gets it as well. But it's actually the Treasury. It's the Treasury that doesn't recognize that it's in our interests to protect our economy by actually protecting our security. The two are symbiotically interlinked.
Tobias, we have 30 seconds left, but I'd like to get your thoughts on these UAV drones used on the battlefield in Ukraine. These are the so-called suicide drones, where they're unmanned, somebody is manning them from whatever territory, and they hone in on a soldier, sometimes with his hands in the air, and they blow up. Are these war crimes? Yeah. Is this just war? What's going on here? I've got concerns about them.
Yes, it is. And I'm pleased that Britain and other nations are actually codifying and actually collecting the data for all these. So any war crimes that are actually taking place can be chased, can be verified and looked into in longer time. It's an important piece of work to do because, absolutely, if it's a war crime, it should be pursued.
Okay. Got it. We're going to run out of time, unfortunately. Tobias Ellwood, thank you. Really appreciate you being with us. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
OK, more coming up at 10 o'clock, including the Prime Minister's reportedly sent a senior aide off to Mauritius to rush through the Chagos Island deal before Donald Trump's inauguration in January. That's despite the president-elect warning he'll veto the agreement. So, is Sir Keir Starmer hell-bent on wrecking the special relationship? I'll tackle that at 10 p.m. Let me know your thoughts on that as well. gbnews.com/your say. Is Keir Starmer deliberately winding up Donald Trump? Back in just a tick.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours see a return to wet weather in the south with blustery winds. A different story further north where frost and fog will prevail because of high pressure sitting to the north of Scotland. That's keeping winds light and skies clear as we go into Tuesday night. Meanwhile, another low turns up across the southwest. Wet and windy weather into southwest England, South Wales, and then by midnight running along the south coast, pushing into the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. The heaviest rain will be along southern counties of England with the risk of localised flooding because it's coming on top of all the wet weather we've recently had, and it's going to be an unsettled but mild start to Wednesday in the south and across central parts of England and Wales. Very different conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we start with clear spells, frost and some dense fog patches, especially for parts of Northern Ireland. Poor visibility on the roads first thing, so watch out for that. Also some fog patches for southern Scotland, northern England. Chilly start out there. But for the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia and the southeast, A damp start to the day with the winds pushing outbreaks of rain or showers in from the southwest, and then those winds changing direction as the rain clears into the afternoon and becoming increasingly strong down the eastern side of England. Meanwhile, brightening skies for West Wales, the southwest, as well as Northern England and Northern Ireland once any early fog patches clear. A crisp but bright day for northern and eventually western parts of the country, whilst it stays cloudy and breezy further southeast. Thursday starts with outbreaks of rain into the southwest. This rain, generally light and patchy, shouldn't cause too many issues, but it then spills into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales, whilst it stays dry and bright further north and east. Friday's similar. We're going to see some rain at times in the west, and it turns milder by Saturday.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Ben Leo.
I've spoken to people close to the incoming Trump administration, and there are deep, deep concerns about a Mauritian government that is moving a long way to the left.
He was warned how Trump felt, but Sir Keir Starmer's ploughing ahead anyway with surrendering the Chagos Islands.
He himself is a man of very interesting background, because he is, by inclination and politics for a long time, a person of the very, very far left.
So is the truth that the PM loves swiping assets because he's a raging commie? Also tonight, forget the grannies and farmers. Your taxpayer money is going on expensive legal aid lawyers for asylum seekers in a bid to crack the backlog. The first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages are minutes away, and tonight's panel are ready to go. I'm joined by columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, political commentator Alex Armstrong, and former Labour Defence Minister Bill Rammell. And it's chaos in government, but at least we've got decent opposition.
Song, bring the boomer no fear, bring the boomers the song of the summer this year.
Put him on the boom meter, working a rate.
Why is the Prime Minister continuing to mug off Donald Trump? But first, your news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Ben, thank you, and a very good evening to you. It's just gone 10 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer has said that today's long-overdue ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah will provide some measure of relief to citizens in the region, adding that this deal must now be turned into a lasting political solution in Lebanon. In a statement released a short while ago, the Prime Minister also added that there must now be immediate progress towards a ceasefire deal in Gaza and the release of all hostages. In a televised address earlier on, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "We will return all our hostages, we will ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel, and we will return the residents of the north safely to their homes." Earlier tonight, US President Joe Biden held a press conference at the White House, saying that the US and France will provide assistance to ensure the ceasefire deal is implemented.
Reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities.
Elsewhere, Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said it was a very difficult day for Luton after the owner of Vauxhall announced plans to shut its van-making factory. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut the plant, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis, which also owns brands including Citroën, Peugeot and Fiat, said it would combine its electric van production at its other UK plant in Ellesmere Port. Stellantis added it hopes to transfer hundreds of jobs to the other plant. Rules imposed to speed up the transition to electric vehicles in the UK partly drove the decision, the company said. A Unite spokesman said the proposal that has been tabled today has been a complete slap in the face for our members in Luton, where Vauxhall vehicles have been manufactured for 120 years. Whatever the positive benefits this plan may have for Ellesmere Port, that is not acceptable. Russia has barred cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper and Rachel Reeves, from entering the country under new sanctions published by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Jonathan Reynolds and Ed Miliband are also among the 30 British citizens listed. The Russian ministry said it was putting members of the UK's political and military establishment, as well as journalists, on its stop list. It comes as Russia earlier on expelled a British diplomat and accused him of spying. Downing Street has denied these allegations, labelling them as baseless. And just briefly, the tobacco and vapes bill has cleared its first hurdle in the House of Commons this evening. MPs voted 415 to 47, that's a majority of 368, to approve the bill at second reading. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch was among the 47 MPs to vote against the bill, according to the division list. There was a free vote for Tory MPs, with former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins among the 23 Conservatives who voted in favour of the bill. The bill will undergo further scrutiny at a later date. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Keir Starmer's fond of giving things away that I'm starting to wonder if he's a bit of a commie. His bizarre deal to give away the Chagos Islands, despite stitching up the UK and US and benefiting China in the process, is quite frankly unexplainable. Just a few months ago, the esteemed Peter Hitchens explained how Starmer was a man of the extreme left whose roots can be found in Trotskyism.
What makes you suspect of Keir Starmer personally?
Starmer himself is a man of very interesting background. I think his struggles over what I find actually the rather dull subject of the transgender issue are interesting. The reason why he struggles over it is because he is, by inclination and politics for a long time, a person of the very, very far left. He was mixed up with a tendency called Pabloism in his 20s, which is an outward branch for Trotskyism.
Interesting. So are Sir Keir's commie tendencies the reason he was cozying up to Chinese leader Xi Jinping just a few days ago at the G20? I wonder what they talked about. What's also interesting is how our Prime Minister once ended up in communist spy files after visiting a Czechoslovakian work camp at the height of the Cold War. Yes, you heard it. The then 23-year-old was apparently one of 17 students from around the world in 1986 to peek behind the Iron Curtain for a memorial to victims of a Nazi atrocity. All very strange. Anyway, back to the current day. Starmer has apparently sent newly appointed National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell to the Chagos Islands to get the deal over the line before Donald Trump takes office in January. It wasn't meant to take place until spring, and we're even paying Mauritius for the privilege, though Downing Street does refuse to say exactly how much we're coughing up or where the money's coming from. Nigel Farage recently explained why the Americans are so furious about the decision.
I've spoken to people close to the incoming Trump administration, and there are deep concerns about a Mauritian government that is moving a long way to the left, that doesn't appear to like America very much, that is getting closer to China. It's all well and good saying there's a lease deal, but hey, we heard there was a lease deal on democracy in Hong Kong, and look what's happened to that. It would have been very difficult to do the Gulf War, very difficult to do the Iraq War without Diego Garcia. It is that and Guam are the only real assets America's got in that whole part of the world.
So why is Sir Keir Starmer doing it? Our Prime Minister's been behaving like he wants to destroy our relationship with America at a time we need them most. He's refused to condemn the International Criminal Court's massive overreach to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, even failing to rule out that the Israeli PM would be arrested if he lands in Britain. Starmer's been happily allowing Ukraine to lob long-range British missiles into Russian territory. Trump calls it a blatant attempt by the outgoing Biden administration to wreck his incoming presidency by trying to start World War III. This all comes, of course, just months after more than 100 Labour activists campaigned for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in Pennsylvania just before the election. So if not the UK or America, just whose interests does the Prime Minister have in mind when deciding to ditch the Chagos Islands? As ever, the Prime Minister remains an enigma. But let's get the thoughts now of my panel. Esther Krakow, columnist and broadcaster Alex Armstrong, and the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Good evening to you all. Welcome back.
Evening.
Alex Armstrong, is Keir Starmer deliberately trying to wind up the incoming US president?
So this is really interesting, right, because this deal doesn't look like it's going to be done until the early stages of next year anyway, and there's potential that it's going to be held up in judicial review. So even if he's trying to speed it up, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to hold off the Trump administration regardless. I could be wrong. Bill might be able to clarify a little bit more on parliamentary procedure on that. But I will say this whole policy is a complete disaster. It was clearly intended that a Biden administration would come into office and continue their support for whatever they're doing in the Chagos Islands. So whatever happens here, we're getting a lot of foreign policy that Starmer and Lammy have sort of flown around the world to get all these deals. They tried to get a deal with Joe Biden originally months ago to get the long-range missiles. They were laughed out of the room by Biden. He's only changed course now. So I wonder whether this is more of a Biden administration thing to frustrate Trump more than it is Starmer, and Starmer's just doing the bidding.
But we have to remember this started under the Tories. So this process was started under the Tory government. So and they must take the blame for even initiating this, because David Cameron actually said he was not interested, and he completely put a hold on that. That being said, I think this is a very bad faith way to act, because they're clearly trying to speed this up, knowing that the Trump's administration are not going to be happy about this. And also, it's a really bad way to start our relationship with this new administration. I still cannot believe David Lammy's in a job after calling what now is going to be the next president of the US a Nazi sympathizer and fascist. I mean, whatever your views on politics, it is so unprofessional, and knowing that you could potentially represent this country sitting in front opposite Donald Trump, it's awkward and it's embarrassing. And people undermine the importance of human relationships and diplomacy, but like calling someone a fascist doesn't go a long way.
Apparently, Nigel Farage brokered a meeting. David Lammy talked about how he had dinner with Donald Trump. He had extra chicken, and Trump was very generous.
You wait until he's president.
Well, let's come to the facts at the heart of this. And I declare an interest. For 3 years, I was the Foreign Office Minister responsible for our relations with the Chagosian Islands. I negotiated compensation. I negotiated with the Chagosians in Mauritius, because that's where the vast
majority... How much are we giving them, Bill? You should know. Downing Street are refusing to say. Give us a figure.
Well, in terms of the base, we never give details of that. No government ever has. But the reason...
You can tell me, though.
But no, the reason this has come about is our position...
Hang on, Bill, give me a punt. Give me a figure.
Let him finish.
Tens of millions, probably. Our position was becoming untenable. We were going to face defeat in the International Court of Justice over sovereignty over these islands. And we therefore faced a choice. Do you either reject international law, and I don't think that's the right course, and see our base at Diego Garcia put at risk, or do you negotiate a deal?
We didn't have to do that. We never gave the Chagosians a choice.
Esther, we negotiated a deal, a good deal, a 99-year renewable lease. That's very different to what existed within Hong Kong, and it secures ours.
How was that a good deal if it
interest.
completely ignored the interest of the Chagosians? The Chagosians weren't asked whether they wanted to be handed back to Mauritius.
No,
if you asked the Chagosians whether they would actually have British citizenship over Mauritian citizenship, guess what? 100% of them would choose British, because we actually have a decent human rights record. The Mauritians didn't. The Chagosians were originally put on that island to farm coconuts.
Go back to 2004 when I was negotiating with them, and they wanted sovereignty to go to Mauritius.
Wait, hold on. How is it a good deal if you are cutting out the people that are directly impacted by this and rushing it and then handing them back to an ally of China, which is the most important factor here? It's not a good deal.
Nobody lives in the Chagos Islands. They are distributed around a range of locations.
So then why does Mauritius have
it? The biggest proportion of them live within Mauritius. That's why the deal was done in that way.
I think this goes back to something you were saying a little bit earlier, Bill, which is that we are clearly acting like a declining and unpowerful nation. If this was America's land...
Like a dying empire.
It's constantly dying. If this was America's land, to hell would they give it up? For anybody, right? I think
the elected
reality.
US government encouraged us to reach this agreement.
The new elected ones are going to have something to say about it.
Is that it's not their sovereignty. They don't care. As long as it's got the base protected, that's the bit they care about, right?
Absolutely, and that's what we're concerned about as well.
Right. It was an ICJ court ruling in 2021.
Non-binding.
Which James cleverly adhered to. Why didn't he just turn around and say, no, stuff it, the Chagos Islands are ours, it's a strategic military base for us and the United States? And even now, the US government, Trump and his team are saying this is one of our only bases in that territory, alongside Guam, where we have any presence in that part of the world.
Because if you want pariah states in the world to abide by the rule of international law, you can't blithely reject it when it goes against you. That's what drove the British government under both the Tories and under this Labour government, and it's what drove the Biden administration. Now, in terms of Trump, you know, he being in the White House, the special relationship is important, but it's going to be a bumpy ride.
He's going to retaliate. He holds all the cards.
Hold on, Esther. What you can't do is jump to every erratic whim that he comes up with. We've got to sit him down, explain the deal, why it's in both of our interests. And do you know what? I don't think this is...
It's not going to be in both of our interests. Absolutely not. But this is the thing. This is what happens when politics is run by people who live in La La Land, as if for some reason despots around the world... No, our politicians. Well, yeah, because as if despots around the world are going to respect the rule of law and respect the UK because we've handed out a strategic military base to some island that has loyalties with China. It's ludicrous.
We haven't We haven't handed it over. It is a legally protected 99-year lease that is renewable.
Wasn't Hong Kong handed over after 99 years? How did that turn out?
It wasn't renewable.
Aren't the people in the UK? Aren't the people in the UK seeking asylum from Hong Kong? No, I'm sorry.
It wasn't renewable.
You got to let them finish.
Look at the historical record.
That's why China is persecuting people from Hong Kong. Yeah, because it wasn't renewable.
Because the mandate of the legal deal ran out.
And I'm sure China respects us a lot more.
The deal in respect of Diego Garcia is very different. It's 99 years and then it's renewable.
Honestly,
may I just say, I think I'll go back to my previous point, is that we are acting like a declining nation. We're acting like a nation where it's lost its power. If this was Thatcher and it was the Falklands, which the Americans also told us to give up before we went to war, we would have given over the Falkland Islands, right? So it's about how our politicians perceive our position of power. Now, I understand there's a case to be made. The Americans have said, get rid of it. We want the base to be protected. And there's a whole court ruling on that. We can get into the nitty-gritty on those things. But I do think that there is a sense, and why the British public is so incensed about this is because they feel this is more signs of a declining country.
What evidence base have you got that the British public are incensed?
Well,
there's no polling evidence on it.
Well, look, I think, Bill, if you were to speak to most average Joes in Britain, they would feel rather upset.
It's our only strategic asset in that region.
It goes back to that. I genuinely do believe that.
I think most average Joes aren't aware of the issue.
Do you think... so Keir Starmer is in charge now. He's our Prime Minister. He's our leader. He has the power not to do this.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any truth in my suspicion that he's happy to do this because he's just a bit of a commie?
No.
I'm struggling not to come out with an expletive, Ben. That's
absolutely not.
bunkum.
Is he a communist?
No, of course he's not.
Peter Hitchens was talking about
Peter Hitchens is bonkers. Certifiable.
His origins in Pavlovism, which is an offshoot of Trotskyism. You don't think he has any communist leanings?
Look at his actions in opposition and in government.
Well, he's taking from the rich.
He's a centrist Labour leader that's a million light years away from being a communist.
He may not be a communist, but I definitely think he's Orwellian, and that's my personal opinion on the way that he's conducting the state. I don't think he's a communist.
He's not a communist.
Do you think Peter Hitchens is talking rubbish?
He's not talking rubbish. I mean, his history pans out, but like he was 23. People change their political leanings from a young age all the time. I'm sorry, like holding him because of what he did at 23. I mean, Peter Hitchens was a Trotskyist. Like, you know, like he was self-confessed Trotskyist.
Yeah, that's where he speaks from. He says, "I'm an expert on this."
But he changed his mind.
Peter's claim now is that he is such an expert on Trotskyism because Peter was a Trotskyist. He can recognise the signs now in somebody. He says, so Keir Starmer hides it very, very well.
Keir
Do you know what?
Starmer is not...
I've been fighting Trotskyists all my political life. Keir Starmer, I recognise them, I smell them. Keir Starmer's not a Trotskyist.
No, I think Bill's absolutely right. I don't believe he's a communist. And that would be, you know, if that was the case, we'd be giving away all of our taxpayers money. We'd be living under a 70%, 80% tax regime. And the winter fuel payments...
We are giving away all our taxpayers.
Well, no. Listen, I'm certainly not agreeing that we're not being taxed way above where we should be. But things like the winter fuel payments, a communist would never have agreed to that.
Or tax education.
So he is doing a bit of austerity, which I think goes against that in his current day as Prime Minister. However, as I said, I think when you're looking at the way he's conducting the state in terms of the Home Office, I think people do feel there's a sense that they're living under some form of Orwellianism. And that is where people should pay attention because, you know, Yvette Cooper is doubling down on non-crime hate incidents. She's not getting rid of them like any sensible person would.
Well, she said that there's going to be a fundamental review of them.
Well, she said the other day...
We're going slightly off topic. It just seems to me, I don't know if you would agree, panel, that Keir Starmer doesn't seem to be making... Maybe he's not making a deliberate effort to wind up Trump, but he's not making efforts to... You know,
this issue has not been anywhere near Donald Trump. You know, Nigel Farage is freelancing. Yeah, he's freelancing to try and, exaggerate his influence.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
When the Trump presidency starts, and this deal is not being speeded up. It's not going to happen
how do you know
before Trump actually takes office.
Will it need a vote in Parliament?
Yes, it will.
Right.
The bill's going to come back for scrutiny before the deal takes place. And I think when we engage with the Trump administration, they'll end up supporting it.
And there's a wider question we have to ask ourselves as Brits. America is thriving, its economy is blowing up, ours is stagnating, Europe's is stagnating, it lacks competitiveness, and Starmer is dragging us closer to the part of the continent, and unfortunately is going down, not up. We need to be tying ourselves much closer to the Trump administration in terms of economics, because that's where the money is, and we need our economy to grow. We've just seen thousands of job cuts today, and we've got to go to where the growth is.
If Trump goes down the road of tariffs, God help us all.
Well, no, I spoke to Eric Trump, his son, last week, and he said Britain won't have any tariffs as long as we play nice. So no more sending activists over to the US, no more calling him a Nazi-sympathising sociopath or whatever David Lammy said. Those were his words. Play nice.
But David Lammy has quoted Trump's book today, which I think is another 360 on his opinions.
All right, we've got to move on. Good discussion. Coming up next, we're on track for a record-breaking year in the Channel. The Asylum's claims backlog has more than doubled in just a year. Can you believe it? And the government has just opened even more migrant hotels, as I revealed last week. That big election campaign pledge. We're going to close all the hotels. Well, the truth is, they're popping up everywhere. But don't worry, ministers have just come up with a new plan to fix it all. More money for lefty lawyers to represent the migrants. So will this really solve Britain's small boats crisis? Former Labour MP Dennis McShane joins me next.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The BBC has been branded jaw-achingly stupid, not by me, by the way, over its decision to cast black and ethnic minority actors in the historical drama of Vauxhall. Now, is this a forward-thinking idea or nonsense? Are we rewriting history? Henry, I mean, the Tudors were real-life people. They were pretty much white.
Well, some of these shows depart so much from historical context anyway that maybe it doesn't make any difference. But I think just generally we've got a problem in this country with portraying history in its correct sense. You can't change history. And I think it's about the motivation. If the motivation is to sort of to some sort of, you know, to make a political point, then I think it's wrong.
What I find kind of tedious about people finding this instant jaw-droppingly stupid, Jesus was portrayed by somebody who's half Slovak and half Irish. Moses was portrayed in the Exodus by an Englishman. So, you know, same with Anne Boleyn, you know, was portrayed by Natalie Portman, who is Jewish. So if this is the one thing that's getting people angry, then there's something deeper within that rage, because I think Hollywood's been doing that, where people...
When you say something deeper, do you think there is a hidden racism and people are complaining about this?
Well, I think for some, maybe yes. I can't speak for everybody because you know, this news dropped today. I don't know why they are thinking that it's egregious, but there absolutely must be some underlying racism if this is the only one that you're upset about.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Banter Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. Now, reports tonight suggest that the government will announce millions in extra funding for lawyers to represent migrants in an attempt to clear the asylum backlog, which has more than doubled in just 1 year. By the end of September, there were over 62,000 claims awaiting an outcome in first-tier tribunal courts, with each case on average, taking a staggering 46 weeks. Can you believe that? A shortage of lawyers to represent migrants is worsening the backlog, and ministers hope a major uplift in legal aid funding will help increase the number of firms and lawyers willing to take on asylum cases. And it comes after I revealed on this show last week that Labour ministers have been forced to increase the number of migrant hotels from 213 to 220. That's despite a pre-election promise to end their use. So, will an increase in legal aid end the use of migrant hotels, or is it just another gimmick to avoid tackling the crisis head-on? I'm joined now by former Labour man Dennis McShane. Dennis, is this just a cheap gimmick? The hotels are cropping up all over the place.
Well, it sounded from what you're saying a very expensive gimmick. I've looked at the Home Office provisions for spending this year, and they've got £6 billion earmarked loosely. That's a lot of money for Rachel Reeves. She's stuck with it because not all can say the last government was terrible. It didn't do anything to dealing with asylum cases. I became an MP 30 years ago. My first surgery, asylum cases. Every weekend after that, asylum cases. And when I left, asylum cases. We've got, currently, it's about 63,000. I think you mentioned the figures there, asylum seekers in the UK. France has got 167,000. Germany's got 352,000. And the US last year handled 2.5 million wanting to come in and taken by their border forces. So actually, believe it or not, I know we go on about the boats. I mean, Rishi Sunak seemed to think the more you said stop the boats, it would mean something was happening. Actually, that little channel is our best protection because in the rest of the world, they just walk across. Now, what we need to do...
It should be our best protection. We used to rule the waves, Dennis. We conquered the world with our navy, and now we can't stop rubber dinghies from Decathlon in Calais.
Yeah, and the Tories ran our armed services. We've now got more admirals than we have any kind of fighting ship under the Tories. They ran down our army and our military to the lowest level for 200 years.
What's that got to do with small boats?
Well, because if you want any kind of military operation to deal with them, you've got to have people to do it.
Well, you need the political will. I mean, we could do it now. We could put some frigates in the Channel and turn them back.
Yeah, and sink them. Well, if you really think you put up a giant Royal Navy frigate destroyer against little rubber Zodiac again, well, I'm glad you're not running that Zodiac.
Well, no, Dennis. You do what Australia did in the mid-2010s, and you put them into very safe lifeboat-style vessels, and you tow them back very safely. They're unsinkable
that's
vessels.
right. The nearest landing takeoff point for migrants coming into Australia, I was there, was Indonesia, more than 1,000 nautical miles away.
Right, so why can't we do it to France?
Well, actually, because France is not 1,000
These
miles
people are
away.
coming from France, a safe country. They're not entitled to asylum anyway.
They're coming into Britain because we don't allow anybody to work here. We don't have ID cards.
Why should they work? We don't know who they are. Dennis, they log their phones.
Well, Ben, just wait.
They log their phones and their passports in the Channel. We don't know who they are, and then you want to give them a job.
Well, what I would do is have digital, well, I just do ID cards. Every other country in Europe does that. You don't get a job without your ID card. You don't get housing. You don't have education. But the Tory party, I don't know about reform, and certainly, I'm afraid, the left Liberals, the Guardian, the Liberal Democrats are fanatically opposed to a key measure that elsewhere doesn't stop it. Because I said, Germany's got, 350,000, but it does put it under some control. But what I would say on this is the quicker we speed it up, the quicker we can start the process of sending them home. There are difficulties with that.
That's your point.
But the other...
They won't be sent home, will they?
No, yes.
We're just going to... If you've got expensive lawyers on $1,000 a day or whatever they're being paid, they're just going to say, tick, tick,
sorry,
you can come in, tick, you can come in, house for him, house for
Sorry,
you.
the way it works, Ben, I've really been through this as an MP again and again. There are tribunals with judges like, magistrates. They're not expensive lawyers. They're court officials, state officials, if you like. And if they believe the person shouldn't be staying here, they say so. Now, at that point, you're quite right. Getting them back out is a problem, but you can't even get to looking at that problem until you've actually dealt with the court procedures. In other countries, again, European, I can cite them if you really want me to. What they say to my asylum seekers is, OK, you've come in here illegally, we're going to deal with you fairly quickly. In the meantime, you're not scrounging off the state. We're not putting you in hotels. You go and get a job of work and you pay a landlord, a Swedish or
Where do you want
Swiss...
them to work, Dennis?
Oh, ask any caterer, delivery, care home,
These people, Dennis, they should be put in secure detention centres.
Fine. Or you want to spend money...
Their asylum cases shouldn't even be heard. They've come illegally. They shouldn't be even considered.
You don't know that they come illegally until
Crossing the Channel in a small boat is illegal.
No, it's not. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not a great yacht.
If I got in my kayak and kayaked to Belgium and tried to claim asylum?
Well, you'd be received with warm arms as a distinguished British broadcaster. And so it really is, getting a bit absurd, this. And this is the first measure. I would say don't let them stay for nothing on our dime. Put them out to work, let them pay British landlords, flat owners, house owners money for renting, put them into work to earn some money, speed up the asylum cases. That means hiring a few more lawyers. I've got nothing against it because I could tell you GBNews stories. Patrick Christys doing a marvellous interview with an Eritrean colonel who had fled for his life, come into Britain, asked for asylum, been put into a nice hostel or little hotel in Datchet on the Thames. That was in 2017. And when Patrick was interviewing me, it was 2022, Theresa May was Prime Minister, and that man, all he wanted to do was have his case heard. But the Tories put no money into the system.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I just think if you encourage people to come here illegally and work,
you don't.
What kind of message are you giving out to the rest of the world?
Because they then the work is simply they're not a drain on the state. I don't know why you want the British taxpayer to keep paying for these people.
To be frank, Dennis, I don't want them here in the first place.
No, of course you don't.
They should be put in detention centres and then immediately sent back to wherever they came from.
Detention centres are unbelievably expensive. I mean, Giorgia Meloni is paying millions for some sort of camps in Albania, and she's got into a lot of trouble over it. Detention centres are so expensive, and I just don't understand the obsession of anybody with wanting taxpayers' money going to put people into detention or little hotels or hostels or whatever. Hostels, whatever, and not earning some money for themselves, not working for employers who need this work.
And Dennis, forget the money. Forget the money and the cost to the taxpayer. Communities don't want migrant hotels or 300 gangs of young men, strange young men, roaming around their communities. They just don't want it.
They don't. There's 350,000 in Germany, and they're just as unpopular there.
The Germans don't want it.
There's 2.5 million in America. They're unpopular there. Good. You invent a system in the world in which everybody stays at home and doesn't flee, whatever the reasons are that they flee.
Well, they can flee.
And we can try and say. I mean, I sat in the Foreign Office sending people back to Brazil for David Blunkett.
They can flee wherever they want and roam whatever lands they want. But my case is just turn them back. We have the best defence, as you've alluded to, the English Channel. Just turn them back. Do what Australia did. And that doesn't mean doing it in an immoral or inhumane way. You can do it safely.
We've tried persuading...
And there's laws for it as well.
I'll give you the name of the new French Foreign Minister. I'll give you his number. You phone him up, Ben. I'll interpret for you. And you say, hey, you, Frenchman, here, we're going to dump all our people back on the French coast, and you sort them out.
You give me his number during the break. Dennis McShane, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Coming up, the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages have arrived. I'll bring you them next after I get this number from Dennis. See you in a sec.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours see a return to wet weather in the south with blustery winds. A different story further north where frost and fog will prevail because of high pressure sitting to the north of Scotland. That's keeping winds light and skies clear as we go into Tuesday night. Meanwhile, another low turns up across the southwest. Wet and windy weather into southwest England, South Wales, and then by midnight running along the south coast, pushing into the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. The heaviest rain will be along southern counties of England with the risk of localised flooding because it's coming on top of all the wet weather we've recently had, and it's going to be an unsettled but mild start to Wednesday in the south and across central parts of England and Wales. Very different conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we start with clear spells, frost and some dense fog patches, especially for parts of Northern Ireland. Poor visibility on the roads first thing, so watch out for that. Also some fog patches for southern Scotland, northern England. Chilly start out there. But for the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia and the southeast, a damp start to the day with the winds pushing outbreaks of rain or showers in from the southwest, and then those winds changing direction as the rain clears into the afternoon and becoming increasingly strong down the eastern side of England. Meanwhile, brightening skies for West Wales, the southwest, as well as northern England and Northern Ireland once any early fog patches clear. A crisp but bright day for northern and eventually western parts of the country, whilst it stays cloudy and breezy further southeast. Thursday starts with outbreaks of rain into the southwest. This rain, generally light and patchy, shouldn't cause too many issues, but it then spills into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales, whilst it stays dry and bright further north and east. Friday's similar. We're going to see some rain at times in the west, and it turns milder by Saturday.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. The first of the newspaper front pages have just dropped, and we'll start with the Daily Express. Christmas dinner hits £50 after budget mess. Families face a £50 Christmas dinner bill after Labour's budget sent festive food costs soaring. I was just trying to establish whether that's £50 a head or £50 for the entire meal.
I was about to say, if it's £50 for the entire meal, is that what, like McDonald's?
I mean, that's what I was just asking my producers. Am I being out of touch by suggesting £50 for an entire meal for a family is relatively cheap?
That's cheap. No, that's pretty cheap.
I think it's £50 per head, but then, like, if it's per head...
a tax-free zone, so I wouldn't give it much credence.
Yeah, maybe we can debate that next.
You won't be getting a column anytime
soon. The Metro, Southport stabbings teacher, she has spoken out for the first time. This is the dance class teacher, Leanne Lucas, who was in the lesson that day, taking the class for those little girls who were tragically murdered or killed, at least. There's an ongoing case, so we need to be quite careful with our language about it. I lost my faith in the world, she says. Poor woman. The Daily Mail, two stories here which kind of link. Labour's net zero electric car plan in chaos. Ministers are set to water down sales targets as Vauxhall plant closure blamed on eco-policy. That's news today that Vauxhall's closing its Luton plant, putting around 1,100 jobs at risk. But, Esther, we spotted this one at the top. The woman whose husband had a vasectomy because she won't have a baby in a world she's convinced faces climate oblivion. So what's happening here? They've decided not to have a baby because they're convinced the world is coming to...
Not only has she decided not to have a baby, she doesn't want to risk it, so she got her husband snipped. I think she didn't want a baby to begin with. Either that or she's totally mad.
It's the ultimate cover story.
Or maybe she saw the cost of childcare and decided, actually, I need a good cover story here to decide not to do it.
This is quite chilling, actually, because this is proof that there are people in this world who think the climate crisis is going to be such a catastrophe, they'd rather not bring children into the world. I mean, they've been so affected by the propaganda.
I think it's bonkers. If anything, it's a reason to have more children so that humanity progresses and survives. I mean, it's absolutely backwards. And this sort of stuff shocks me a little bit because she hasn't actually had a child and she said, no, you must have a vasectomy. Well, that's stopping both of them ever considering having children. And I think that's quite insane.
Why didn't she get...
maybe he's on board. Well, he must be on board with it, right? He must be on board.
I think she needs to get out more. I mean, you know, it's not a sane and a rational judgment to say, because of your fears about the future of the planet, you're not going to have children. I mean, the other story... does concern me. You know, my uncle worked on the factory line at Vauxhall in Luton. I was the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bedfordshire main campus in Luton. I know how critical it is to the Luton economy. Now, there is an argument that there's always been an interplay between Luton and Ellesmere Port, and there's now going to be a big investment in Ellesmere Port. But I think, you know, and we're probably part company here, I think you do need to get to net zero, but you need to take business and people with you. And I think the government needs to amend some of the ways it's doing it, and I welcome the fact that it seems they're going to be dialing down the targets.
OK. We're short of time, unfortunately, but we're going to get to this this clip of Ed Davey. Have you seen this panel? So the cringe fest continues. Take a look at his latest attempt to get down with the kids by challenging the Prime Minister to a game of FIFA on TikTok.
Christ.
The boom song, bring the boom and no fear, bring the boom was the song of the summer this year.
Put him on the boom meter, we're gonna rate it. Put the fries in the bag now, already ate it.
Boom and doom in the restaurant.
Who said one hit wonder it, bring the boom. We're back bringing it strong, so turn up the volume.
Gotta bring the boom song, bring the boom and no fear, bring the boom.
Get on your feet and crank the volume, cause it's all about the family and it's all about the boom.
We bring the boom, that's what we do. We bring the boom, we bring the boom to you.
I'm sorry, I don't think this is very funny at all, actually. I know I've been giggling about it in the day, but in all seriousness...
He's the leader of the third biggest party in Parliament.
In light of what this government's doing, I don't think this is very funny at all.
No, but he's the leader of the third biggest party in our Parliament, and he's not taking things seriously. We have crisis up and down our country, and instead he's out doing dances in front of Parliament while the taxpayer fits the bill. It's bonkers.
But nobody takes the Liberal Democrats seriously in terms of policy. But he needs airtime and he needs profile. And it worked for him during the general election. The Lib Dems got their biggest number of seats since the early part of the last century.
That's only because the Tory vote collapsed and that just gave them this...
Yeah, but he needed profile, and this is how he got it.
But Nick Clegg managed to break through profile-wise. I mean, he was, like, a very, very popular leader at the time when the coalition was about to...
But isn't it a pity when a political leader needs a profile that they don't focus on policies, but instead on these cheap
dumbing
gimmicks.
down of politics, isn't it? It's the dumbing down of our parliament, which is just so unfortunate.
But the Lib Dems have always been a vacuum in terms of politics.
Wow.
You know, they'll cosy up to the left in a Labour-leaning constituency, they'll cosy up to the right in a Tory-leaning constituency.
I mean, what do they stand for? What is the purpose? Someone please tell me, what is the purpose of the Liberal Democrats? What do they stand for? Who are they trying to appeal to? Because I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just completely inane. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's bad enough seeing adults on TikTok and whatever else doing this, let alone Ed Davey, who's meant to be the leader of a political party. And he did the same in the election campaign, of course.
And it worked.
I guess, yeah, but to his credit, I guess it worked.
Well, he was covering up for his post office scandal
I'm
nonsense.
sorry, yeah, it didn't work. First of all, he was trying to rebrand because it was associated with the post office scandal.
Well,
and also, people were so desperate to get the Tories out that there was a lot of tactical voting going on. That's not to say that his cheap gimmicks during the election actually worked. People were just more sick of the Tories.
OK. Interesting. Just going back to the vasectomy, I'm going to let you into a little secret now. My dad had a vasectomy and then still had me. So you could say, either I was a mistake or I was a miracle. Was I a miracle or a mistake?
You heroically broke through.
Yeah, indeed.
You came off probably more odds than most of us, actually, there.
There's people watching at home shouting, you know...
Too much information.
Why didn't it work?
The left are going mad.
Right, coming up, the rest of tomorrow's newspaper front pages with my panel, and I'll reveal what Patrick Christys, the man who runs this show, of course, he's back on Monday, has been getting up to on his honeymoon. That's next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As Strictly Come Dancing approaches its iconic Blackpool episode, marking halfway through the competition, visually impaired dancers across the country have spoken out about how groundbreaking the casting of Chris McCausland is, who suffers from, if I hope I'm saying this correctly, retinitis pigmentosa, and they've found him particularly inspiring. We've been talking, Sean, about how the casting of Strictly has been inspiring to so many people, but I imagine there'll be lots of people who are watching this at home finding your story of resilience really inspiring, because you've obviously really been through it. Is dancing something that has sort of, you know, helped keep you going through all of those troubles? And what does it mean to you to see casting like this on a show like Strictly Come Dancing?
Like I say, all the things I went through. So those 9 years when I wasn't dancing, you know, I was still dancing in my head and just banging on to other people. Very much not just people with sight loss. You know, I've been a big advocate for people with social isolation. So many people on their own now, social anxiety, especially since COVID. And I just want people to get out. The stuff that I'm doing and all the stuff Chris is obviously doing, it will inspire others. Again, like I say, just not people just with sight loss. I had so many people come up to me in the early days, guys, and now that say, you know what, Shawnee, I've seen you do it, so I'm just going to do it. But you just got to get over yourself, because if you bother to do the maths, you know, because all it is maths and walking. Yeah. You know, that's all it is.
Maths and walking actually sounds quite difficult.
Sean, thank you.
Oh, come on, mate. Can you shout? Can you walk? Crack on.
Sean, you're an inspiration. Thank you, mate, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. You're a star, and so glad.
Just before I go, I'm just going to say this is Kev. Here's Kev.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, welcome back. More front pages have just dropped. Let's get stuck into the Daily Telegraph. Electric vehicle rules may be watered down. Industry backlash could see car makers allowed leeway over zero emissions. The weight loss jabs for jobless in Labour drive to get people back to work. A major weight loss injection trial in Manchester with a US pharma company will examine the impact of obesity on employment. I'd say it has quite a big, excuse the pun, effect on unemployment. The Sun, I love this story, because I think it's quite a good debate surrounding it. Coke ref in bet probe. So this is the shamed Premier League referee David Coote, who there's lots of videos been coming out in recent weeks about him making comments about Premier League managers. There's accusations that he's been sniffing suspicious white powder and so on and so on. I just wanted to ask you, Esther, so when it comes to people getting involved in drugs and taking drugs and it kind of affects their work, I mean, this guy was accused of sniffing something maybe a day or two before a Premier League game. Should we be treating them with sympathy and empathy and looking after them from a health aspect, or do we treat them as criminals and say, no, you've broken the law, you've been taking allegedly Class A's, you're out on your backside, son?
Certainly the former. I don't think treating people like criminals for ingesting substances they shouldn't is a good way to get them to stop doing it. I think we take away from... We lose the fact that these drugs are often addictive and that there's a lack of agency there, and I'm all about Mrs. Agency, you know, your life, your choice. But in general, I do think we should decriminalise drug use. I really think we need to review our drugs policies in this country. This idea of treating people that take drugs who need help as criminals and then just lining the pockets of drug dealers, making drugs more available and more expensive and more potent than ever is ludicrous to me. And I think we should have a similar approach to people like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, soft drugs have effectively been decriminalised. That's the reality. But I think, to answer your question, it depends on what you do to some extent.
Yeah.
And if you are in a leadership position and a referee, and you know, he's not only allegedly taken cocaine, but he said outrageous things about opposing managers. If you're in that position, it's not tenable.
He's also accused now on this front page in The Sun, he's accused of basically rigging a yellow card. So I think he texted a friend after a game where he booked a certain player and he said to his friend via text, "I hope you backed as discussed." I mean, that's
criminal.
Atrocious. That's fraud.
That's criminal. That has nothing to do with the drugs.
That's a completely
criminal.
separate issue. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with decriminalising drugs personally, but I completely sympathise with Esther's perspective on this. We shouldn't treat drug users like criminals. It's just poor, and they need help, a lot of them. They really do. And actually, I've seen some of the government services for people who need support or who need rehab, and they are absolutely atrocious. People would rather die using those drugs than go into those rehab centres. They're dangerous, they are horrendous, and we need to think about care, particularly because drugs are penetrating young children at a very, very rapid rate.
And they're more potent than ever.
But if it's a teacher or a police officer or
Someone
a judge,
in a position of
you know,
care.
it's not tenable to say it's OK for them to take drugs.
No, but we're not saying it's OK, it's the approach. I mean, on the broader point, I just think our approach to drugs just hasn't worked. We've sunk billions of pounds into a strategy that has not reduced the level of drugs on our streets. The drugs are more potent and more available, they're more dangerous than ever. I mean, the bottom line is we need to try something else.
Yeah, sure. OK, lots of you have been saying all week, or asking at least, where Patrick Christys has been. Of course, he's been on his honeymoon, and he posted this picture. We got it on social media. Was it yesterday? And he said, he's in Thailand. Some commenters said, "Is that the Brighton Pavilion?" Looks very similar. Looks very similar.
I would have said Taj Mahal. I'm joking.
But Patrick said, let me just get the tweet up. He just said, "Hope you're not missing me too much." He's back from his honeymoon on Monday, and he's looking forward very much to seeing you all. And the reason he delayed his honeymoon, so he got married earlier in the year, was because Rishi Sunak, of course, called the surprise general election. So there's no way that Patrick and Emily could go away for a honeymoon whilst the general election was going on. Anyway, there we go. Patrick's back on Monday. He's missing you. He hopes you're all having a nice time, and he can't wait to see you on Monday. Right, should we get stuck into Greatest Britain, Union Jackass? Esther, should we start with your Greatest Britain?
For Women Scotland, who are currently suing the Scottish Government.
Oh, what for? For Women Scotland. What are they suing them for?
Suing. They've asked for a judicial review on the Scottish Government's stance on what a woman is. So as we sit here now, the Supreme Court is debating on the definition of a woman.
Come on then, Esther. What is a woman?
I'm a woman.
You
can see. You can see what a woman is.
They'll put it in the dictionary.
Every woman.
It's
my wife's favourite song.
XY chromosomes.
Alex, very quickly, what is a woman?
A female genetic woman, XX chromosomes, lots of other... Is it XY? No, it's XX. And lots of other distinguishing features that we can all see.
Bill?
It's someone who doesn't have a penis.
There you go. That's a better way of putting it. Thank you.
Good shout.
I didn't want to say that word live on air.
Alex, your Greatest Britain?
My Greatest Britain is Rupert Lowe MP today. He wrote a fantastic tweet in response to one of Keir Starmer's messages, which Keir Starmer outlined. This is my government's going to do this, my government. And Rupert Lowe had to remind him, actually, it's not your government. You serve on behalf of His Majesty and you serve on behalf of the public. And I think politicians need reminding of that very regularly.
That's a snide technicality. I'm not sure he forgot.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. We've got to remind people that they serve us, not themselves.
OK. Bill?
Sheila Reith Doctor, who co-invented the world's first insulin pen, born of her own experience of bringing up a child with type 2 diabetes, and, you know, for innovation and creativity, she's my Greatest Britain.
That's
Dr. Sheila Reith, is that how you pronounce it?
Reith Doctor.
She was given a CBE at the Pride of Britain Awards for improving the lives of millions of people with diabetes worldwide, and she's a Brit.
Yep.
Awesome.
Did you? I mean, I'm proving very ignorant on this this miraculous woman. Did you guys know about her?
I didn't know. I've never heard of her.
I'm glad
before,
I know
actually,
about her now, though.
Yeah, well done.
So her work led to the development of insulin pens, which soon replaced syringes as the way to take drugs for millions of people. OK, I think I've learned something tonight, as you do every day. Bill Rammell, she is our greatest Britain, Dr. Sheila Reith. Well done, Dr. Sheila. Your Union Jackass.
Ed Miliband for his net zero madness.
Yeah.
That's actually costing jobs. I mean, this idea that, you know, businesses and homes must be brought onto net zero, I actually think we need a vote on it because it's permeating so many aspects of public policy that I think people just need to, like, we need agreement for all on board with this trajectory.
Yeah, well, look at this this Vauxhall news today. I spoke to the MD of Vauxhall when I covered Martin's show a couple of weeks back, and he was saying, well, he didn't tell me specifically, but all car manufacturers in the UK now have had to drop production of diesel and petrol cars to make sure that they allocate their ratio of petrol and diesel and EVs matches up. So because there's such a low demand for EVs, they've now stopped producing as many petrol cars, even though the demand's there. I mean, it's just crazy. And now we've lost 1,100 jobs in Luton. So absolutely balmy. And also, by the way, do you remember Labour during the election? They were saying energy bills will be cut after we're elected. £300 off your energy bills. Where's that gone?
And we didn't say after 4 months. We said at the end of the Parliament.
Did he say no? I think they said by the. I think immediately was the claim.
No, it wasn't immediately.
OK, all right, Alex, your Union Jackass.
Yeah, it's Becky Cooper MP, backbencher, and a group of others. Actually,
she's my
not
MP.
just her. Well, there you go.
She? Poor thing.
Her and a bunch of other backbenchers, instead of worrying about what really matters to our country, have decided to petition the government to remove and change artwork around Parliament to make it more inclusive. It's just like, come on, you guys
what
are
is
just
inclusive
wasting our
artwork?
time.
Like we're toddlers, like finger painting and
something like that.
Bill, we've got 30 seconds. Your Union Jackass.
British Transport Police for allowing transgender women who are still men to strip search women. And, you know, we fought for decades
that did not happen.
to protect women's safe spaces. It's an outrage.
Yeah, it's a new policy from BT where they're allowing biological men who are identifying as women to strip search women.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think BTP were nominated either yesterday or the last week, and I think I probably picked them. So any other night it would have been BTP. But Dr. Becky Cooper, who's my MP down south, she ousted the father of the house, Sir Peter Bottomley. He'd been there for decades. Yeah, just ridiculous.
What a shame. And focus on the things that matter.
Focus on my constituency, Becky Cooper, please. Yeah, there's a feeling that Labour, they took the council as well down where I live. There's a feeling that it may soon be flipped if there was a by-election or another general election.
Get another petition started.
Right, panel, thank you very much.
This country is not run by petitions.
Absolutely right.
All right, it's not. Unless they're on a recall.
Coming up next, it's Headliners presented by Simon Evans. Simon, what's in store for our viewers tonight?
Oh, good evening, Ben. Well, we have a marvellous range of stories for you this evening. I think the ones that will be raising the blood pressure the highest, probably David Williams claiming he's probably non-binary at the age of 54. You think that might have struck him before now. Barbara Banter, the Women's Footballer of the Year award, despite what is being described as gender controversy. And Georgia Maloney has finally lived up to her fascist reputation as she denounces the immigration rape statistics. So those are the questions that we will be perusing and allowing us to steep.
OK, great stuff. I'll be back from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. Up next, it's Headliners. Here's your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours see a return to wet weather in the south with blustery winds. A different story further north where frost and fog will prevail because of high pressure sitting to the north of Scotland. That's keeping winds light and skies clear as we go into Tuesday night. Meanwhile, another low turns up across the southwest. Wet and windy weather into southwest England, South Wales, and then by midnight running along the south coast, pushing into the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. The heaviest rain will be along southern counties of England with the risk of localised flooding because it's coming on top of all the wet weather we've recently had, and it's going to be an unsettled but mild start to Wednesday in the south and across central parts of England and Wales. Very different conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we start with clear spells, frost and some dense fog patches, especially for parts of Northern Ireland. Poor visibility on the roads first thing, so watch out for that. Also some fog fog patches for southern Scotland, northern England. Chilly start out there. But for the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia and the South East, a damp start to the day with the winds pushing outbreaks of rain or showers in from the southwest, and then those winds changing direction as the rain clears into the afternoon and becoming increasingly strong down the eastern side of England. Meanwhile, brightening skies for West Wales, the southwest, as well as Northern England and Northern Ireland once any early fog patches clear. A crisp but bright day for northern and eventually western parts of the country, whilst it stays cloudy and breezy further southeast. Thursday starts with outbreaks of rain into the southwest. This rain, generally light and patchy, shouldn't cause too many issues, but it then spills into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales, whilst it stays dry and bright further north and east. Friday's similar. We're going to see some rain at times in the west, and it turns milder by Saturday.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Well, drinkers have been warned about a drop in the quality of French wines after poor weather conditions hit this year's grape harvest. Winemakers across France will make 240 million fewer bottles of wine this year, the country's farming ministry said on Tuesday. So should we think of switching from French to English? I'm joined now by sommelier and founder of Inflorescence Wines, Jacinta Madison Williams. Hello, Jacinta.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. First of all, let's just think about the poor French.
We should.
Has this been a fairly universal weather catastrophe for France?
It has. A kind of across the board, we're about 22% down on last year's crops, which is quite significant. I think it's like one of the 4 years over the last century that have been this low. So. And
it's affected both quality and quantity?
I would say more so quantity. There's always ways of counteracting quality. It depends if people are desperate to make wine. They can obviously push out more watered down grapes. There's been a lot of rain, if you hadn't noticed. Not only in France, we felt it here too. But lots of frost, supercell hailstorms have completely wiped out some crops. So in some cases, there's nothing to make. In other cases, it's just really watered down grapes and you want to pick earlier to make sure you're avoiding all those rains. But I would say more so it's quantity. But saying that, France is still the biggest producer of wine in the world. It might be taken over by Spain this year, but as a consumer, don't panic. We're not going to run out of wine. And we obviously have lots of lovely wine growing here now in England. So whether we do make a little jump for a bit to English wine, but there's definitely still lots out there.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Hello, it's 11 o'clock in the evening, which means it's time for tomorrow's newspapers tonight. Join us over the next hour to find out why gorgeous Georgia is embracing her inner racist. Finally, why electric vehicles refuse to fly off the shelves, and the female footballer of the year who might not be. I'm Simon Evans. Tonight we have Josh Howie and Steve N. Allen doing the reviewing, and this is Headliners. But before we visit tomorrow's news, let's go to tonight's headlines one last time with Katie Bowen.
Simon, thank you and a very good evening. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer has said that today's long-overdue ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah will provide some measure of relief to citizens in the region, adding that this deal must now be turned into a lasting political solution in Lebanon. In a statement released a short while ago, the Prime Minister also added that there must now be immediate progress towards a ceasefire deal in Gaza and the release of all hostages. In a televised address earlier on, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "We will return all our hostages, we will ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel, and we will return the residents of the north safely to their homes." Earlier tonight, US President Joe Biden held a press conference at the White House, saying that the US and France will provide assistance to ensure the ceasefire deal is implemented.
Reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities.
Elsewhere, the government is set to weaken rules for electric vehicles amid warnings from car makers that the transition away from petrol and diesel cars is putting the industry's future at risk. Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, has confirmed a review of the government's zero-emission vehicle mandate. It comes as Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut their Luton factory, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The company said that rules imposed to speed up the transition to electric vehicles in the UK partly drove the decision. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis, which also owns brands including Citroën, Peugeot and Fiat, said it would combine its electric van production at its other UK plant in Ellesmere Port. Stellantis added it hopes to transfer hundreds of jobs to the other plant. Terrorist Abdul Rauf Abdullah, the childhood friend of Manchester Arena attacker Salman Abedi,